I learned, I thought I knew a lot about Alzheimer's disease, and I learned so much tonight from listening to all of the words that you transported. So thanks very much for doing what you did.
Thank you.
And I did want to say one thing. One of the people, well, several of the people with Alzheimer's made reference to the fact that they feel they have a red A branded on their foreheads, and that what they had to say is not taken seriously because they have Alzheimer's disease. That's one of the things that is changing with. I work with the Alzheimer's Association as a volunteer, and one of the things that we are doing now is getting more and more people with Alzheimer's disease into our programs and into even into our decision-making processes. Last summer, we did a half a day town hall meeting in Oakland, and we had 200 people there, of whom 100 were people with Alzheimer's disease. And boy, did we get an earful, and did the medical profession get an earful. Some of the things that are said about doctors are probably not true, but some of the things are true. Some of the good things and the bad things. But and I also had a personal relationship. Dr. Al was my mother's doctor, and he's the finest doctor that I've ever had the pleasure of working with, because he did not talk around her or behind her. He talked to her, and he gave her respect, and she gave it right back to him. So that's what I had to say. It wasn't already covered.
If you want to say something, we've got Donahue going over here with the microphone.
You can pass it up. Pass the top.
My father didn't have Alzheimer's.
Yeah, you're fine.
My father didn't have Alzheimer's, but another form of dementia, and he needed to be in a lot of work because he wandered. And one of the things that was stated in there that was so true is not trying to keep them in your world. My sister is a psychiatric nurse, and she would suffer so when she'd go to visit. And somehow for me, I guess it was the fact I'd done some street theater, I went where they were. And I never told a lie to anybody. I didn't know who that was, but I just said I hadn't spoken to her, didn't know she was coming. You know, those kinds of things. And I actually enjoyed my visits. Because you don't go visit them, they come visit you.
And down here in the first row is Joe Debs, and thank you, Joe and Jeanette, for coming. Did you have any feedback?
No, are you going to do anything else with this? I like to play myself. Personally, you did a good job. You bring it close to me as you could.
We're recasting in a few months.
But that's a good question. Is there a possibility of you taping this thing and making it available? Because I mean, it would be a great learning tool for support groups and things like that.
There's been some talk about this. Poor guy has to finish his master's first. He's got to finish writing it.
Yeah.
But there has been some talk about it because you know we've been bantering about backstages. We would love to have this have another life, not necessarily. Although a tape would be good. We'd like to perform it.
Yeah. I mean, it's good for you.
Because, and perform is a really strange term.
I know.
Because just in terms of the process of what we're doing, every instinct that we have as an actor, we have to ignore.
Yeah.
It's just it's interesting for us to try to recreate what you guys
you did it, at least as far as I'm concerned. You certainly did.
So just in terms of the whole process, and we've learned a hell of a lot about Alzheimer's because I don't have nobody in my family has suffered from it. So to me, I knew something about it, but it was kind of like what Cindy says at the beginning. It's you always see the commercials and you see it's just this drooling person, and they're not like that. So we've learned that from our standpoint.
The answer is yes. We do want to do something with it. We intend to do something with it. What that is and when that will be, we'll have to wait and see. But we very much hope to, because it's gotten a very nice response so far, and we're very pleased about that. So there seems to be interest in coming to see it, and we'll let you tell us what you thought about it. You know, we're happy. We're really happy. Oh, by the way, don't let me forget. I have most of your emails, but I'll be sending out a link to a survey to help me with my research. So.
Because he is doing his master's thesis.
You didn't make that clear. He's doing a master's thesis. This is a master's thesis project.
Yes.
Which is why Scott didn't end up playing all the parts himself. Which was the original intent.
That's what I saw. That's what I thought. You were going to play all of it.
It was, yeah. Originally, Jim, it was, and because with Anna DeVere Smith, that's how she did it too, her process, and I was modeling after that. But what quickly happened, we talked about this a little bit last night, is that what I found was that all of a sudden, pairs came and answered my flyer in my call, and I said, well, what am I going to do about this? Well, I'll figure out about that somewhere down the line. And then we added an actress, and then it just kind of evolved.
Yeah, the pairs thing is such a great dynamic, because I see that. I do a couple of support groups, and I see the husbands and wives, together, and it's this theater play is so interesting sometimes.
Do you have
I'm
something?
curious.
No, I was only admitting.
Oh, okay.
I'm just curious what area, or is it in drama that your master's degree is?
Yes, it's in theater. And I have an emphasis on older adult issues, so I'm trying to get information about that through the medium of theater. And I selected this particular topic, personal to me, as the thesis project. So, yeah.
Well, I was just, so much of what I heard tonight was new to me. I've been in denial for quite a few years that my mother has Alzheimer's. I thought, oh, she just has dementia. But so much of what I heard tonight, it's like, yeah, she really does have dementia. Sometimes she has so much clarity, and she will remember things that I just cannot believe. And other times she can't turn on the television. She hooks up the phone and can't figure out how to turn on the television. And at other times she can, turn on channel 3, and it's just kind of amazing to me. And what I think would be really helpful is to have the information possibly in a published script or a book or some sort of hard copy for us to be able to hear it again, because it happened so quickly I can't remember it all. And I'd love to share it with my sister, who is the primary caretaker. So,
Make a script available.
well, I just a video with a script. I don't know, but definitely this needs to go beyond this.
Yes. Needs to get out.
It's a list of the resources.
Oh, no.
Yeah, down here.
Well, I was just curious how long you've been working on this project.
I started a year ago last July, and with the interviews, and I had, as I mentioned in the program, about 16 people who were kind enough to meet with me, and the interviews took until the end of September of last year, and then I started transcribing 45-minute interviews, and I transcribed all of them but 2 myself. I had some help, and I took time off work because I was running out of time, and setting the video, rewind, and so the transcribing process, and then my dramaturg Michelle Cruff and I then took it to the next phase of cutting. Well, we had to pare it down, we had to shape it, we had to find some commonalities, we had to find what we wanted to tell and how we wanted to tell it. And the interesting thing that was brought up last night was that the way in which Dr. Al speaks lend itself to kind of navigating us. He talks about navigating, but he navigated us through this piece, and we just thought it made sense to sort of take excerpts of his sort of blocks, as we first started calling it, and then put it throughout the piece, and that became a big part of the shape of this piece, and I think was a good choice ultimately. So.
And then he brought you in first.
Yeah, but I didn't start till you did.
Yeah. So we started working on this in July.
Yeah, we came in at the end of July
Right.
This year?
of this year.
Wow.
So we took the transcript, the edited transcripts that he'd done, and the 45-minute interviews.
Oh.
And so we watched, and so our process is watching the entire interview because we need to know everything that you folks said and everything that was said, and then it started. And depending on how our acting process works, we start breaking it down in terms of how am I going to approach this? I personally look at the physical. I look for physical hooks that I can start to relate physically to the person while I'm listening to that, and then I start working on the voice and catching the speech patterns. We get the script and it's pretty much just all typed out. I start taking things apart, and writing it out almost like verse. This is where this just to catch the individual speech patterns. And
And
then
I work in the reverse order. I do the vocal and then add the physical.
So it's a different process for all. So the three of us are working in different directions.
You should see my script. There are notes everywhere. Okay, she does this. This is she leaned over. She leaned forward. She did that. It's crazy. All these notes. Smile, don't smile. Smile, don't smile. Yeah.
So this,
it's an interesting process.
the story I tell too is that when we were looking at your interview and the edit, because I was trying to catch your physicality on that, and so my wife is sitting there next to me watching it and telling me every time you blink.
Yeah, because I do that. And the other thing is,
And
that
the problem was
captured
she
my
couldn't blink while
emotions.
she was doing that.
You captured my emotions. I mean,
Oh.
I went back to. It took me back to that day we did the interview, and it captured it. I mean, wow.
But that was that's all part of that process, and then it's just looking at it. And Adrian, who's our director, who isn't here tonight, she helped us shape it. She helped shape the physical look of the piece, and then we'd sit down there. We'd have some rehearsals where basically we'd just sit there and we'd watch the video, and she'd listen to what you said, and tell us, no, that's not what I'm hearing something different, and so we have little discussions about that.
And I also work vocally and outside of the dialogue, what I do, because I've done this process before over the first few years of being in this program, where I stumbled on this process that I love, based on Andrew Veer Smith, and I will tend to, I kind of call it like coding, and sort of shading the tones, where the upper register goes up here, and then when it goes down there, and so that's another kind of.
I have little arrows in my script.
How we
Arrow goes
mark
down,
this
arrow
way.
goes up.
Yeah, I would have little underscores between words that meant a pause, a longer pause, or a short pause. And I wrote some of that in the script, but very little. Yeah.
It was a very interesting journey.
I was just curious whether, as you're telling us how you're scripting it for yourselves, whether feelings are part of what you're scripting and looking for.
That's a kind of a gray area because we have to base it, with this process, we can base it only on what we see. So we're somewhat guessing and hoping that we're right because we're trying to avoid using the actor's interpretation of it. You know what I'm saying?
We're having.
It's part of the message, though.
Yeah.
We're having to trust that the technical aspect of it, catching the rhythm and the cadence, the inflection and all that, will get that.
Right. One of the things we talked about was it was a little harder to memorize because normally, as most actors, I think, as you're memorizing, you're interpreting as you go, and that's part of what's helping you memorize. And we couldn't do that. We had to learn those words and then go back and take all those other layers and put those on. And so it was a very different process. And then also as an actor, you're always looking for the through line, the arc that helps you, this comes here and this comes here. There's a reason you say that. Well, with Marianne, that was not so easy because she's all over the place. So, it's...
That rang so true.
Well, yeah, and you can really understand where she's coming from, but as an actor trying to learn that, plus all the
I
So it was interesting.
was going to say, I thought you did a real good job mimicking, if you will, part about grandma. We bantered back and forth about her boyfriend. And then I asked her, I said, did he look at that? And she said, yeah. Then I was going to ask, I was afraid to ask. I thought I forgot my memory. I was going to say, was grandma there too when we did this?
She was in the other room watching TV.
Okay. I was afraid to say
You
I
inter-
could remember.
So wait, we better watch Joe? Is that what
Because and that was also some of the process in watching the interviews, because there were spots in the interview where you look off this way and I had to ask Scott, because I guess in the Anna Devere Smith world, because he would be doing all of it, because he did the interview, he knows exactly what was going on, he could relive that. I didn't have that knowledge, so I had to figure out, what are you looking at? And so knowing that you might be...
Well, also what I said was that actually Jeanette came home during the course of the interview, but she didn't come into the room because she didn't want to disturb us, I think. So that might have been the noise or something like that.
So what was I looking at?
Well, that's what I think was that noise, maybe, that you were like anticipating her
Oh,
coming
okay.
home.
Yeah.
I thought you said I was looking throughout the interview.
No, just here and there.
No.
Oh,
But I mean, it's, again, and I think, Kim was talking about the through line and things like that, and that's the job that Scott and Michelle helped us with
very much?
in terms of the shaping of the piece, because it gave us something to move through.
Was Kim, were you acting? I thought you were going to start crying at one scene.
I was. Because I
You
did.
did. You got
I had to
wet.
go off and wipe my eyes, yeah. It gets me. I mean, what she has to say is very powerful. Yeah. And you can see in that, if you see her interview, you can see her trying so hard to hold it together. Hold it together. And then,
So,
and then she apologizes for it, which we didn't keep, but she apologizes. It just, well. But, and the other thing that was odd as actors is we want to correct the grammar. It's your natural inclination to fix the grammar. Susan's math drives me crazy. How can you be 14 years younger than him? You're 59, he's going to be 75 in September. I can't make that work. And it makes me crazy. But it's not my choice, so.
I caught it and I thought, oh, she must have misspoken.
She had to have, Jim.
Yeah.
She had to.
Because I noticed it.
Or she's lying about how old she is.
Talking about just this whole process of recreating that and not letting actor things go. If we were presented with this as text without the interviews, we would come up with completely different structures.
Sure.
We would stress different words. We'd try to act it. Yeah.
So do you prefer mimicking in this different way, or
It's two completely different things. I don't think you can even compare it.
Yeah, it's what as an actor, you try to do whatever serves the piece and what you're trying to do. And I think the most important thing for me in this particular piece is to be truthful, to be honest about what we saw, because these are real people talking. They're saying real things, and that's what really connects.
And it's important to them. So we want to be as authentic as well. So.
And if we've done our job in reviewing the tapes, well enough, and we can, as artists can recreate that, then the truth is already there. If we've done the techniques, so I love the process. It is very, very difficult. It's apples and oranges, really, but it's just something that I just enjoy doing. So I will continue.
I wanted to thank you for putting up the real people at the end.
Yeah.
And I could see, I was seeing the echoes of Kim's and Claire's movement. I could see that they really, there was
That kind of thing you mean?
Yeah.
Or this? Yeah.
I really appreciated being able to see.
When you first started, I didn't realize that you were going to be different people. Somehow that I just didn't get catched on to that, even though I read that. And when the accents changed and the behavior changed, I was like, oh, these really are the people. And even though you came back on each time, I didn't look the same, but you were very believable.
Oh, thank you. One of the fun things for me, I said this last night, is B sounds just like my grandmother. I'm from Missouri, B's from Missouri, and I talk to my grandmother now, and I'm listening. Say that again. Okay, got it. Thanks, Grandma. They sound exactly the same. It's so funny.
Mary Ann sounded like my mother-in-law, so thank you.
A little bit of that flat Midwestern A for you there.
Wisconsin.
I felt like there could be another scene, like a nursing home scene, like with a nurse's aide dealing with a patient, and more of the probably the most difficult times of the Alzheimer stage. I don't feel like we got quite there. No, I feel like there could have been another scene.
Did you interview anybody that was in that advanced?
No.
Dealing with anyone in that advanced stage?
No, I didn't, and that was kind of difficult to. I tried to put out flyers and I only got so many responses, and kind of had sort of a window of time where I had to make some decisions. And it's also just, I think challenging. It's a tender area. You don't know if people want to really, volunteer that very, very personal and what they're going through at that time. Did we, want to go there? All of, just choices that you make, and this is what we made something out of what we got with the interviews that we got at the time. So, but I think it's discussed. I think it
Right.
is discussed about the advanced stages within the piece, so that at least we feel like we covered that.
Yet there's so many wonderful things that are said in the interviews that there wasn't time to include.
Yeah.
Cindy, for example, says at one point, talking about Alzheimer's, it's right in bed between us. And John talks about, they don't believe there's stages. It's just beginning, middle, and terminal. And so there's some really great things that are said, but there's just not enough time to put all of it in there. So,
We had to cut.
yeah.
So we could do a whole other show with the stuff.
We can, absolutely.
Yeah.
As I said, the interviews are all 45 minutes to an hour long, and so we had to really just choose those nuggets.
This was the right one.
I really shouldn't do this, but I just kind of want to put my sister on the spot for a second to see how you felt about the home at the beginning and in relationship to the rest of the piece. And do you have any comments and all? You don't have to, but I'm just kind of curious. My sister Nancy.
It brings it back. I mean, it's something that we grew up with when we were younger, and it was teenage years, and it was so hard, and it was, when we were growing up, it was brand new, and nobody really knew about Alzheimer's or what it was, and you're dealing with a grandparent that knew for so many years, and then all of a sudden she was blind, which was even harder, and then going to visit her and her not even having any recognition of you, so it was hard. But I remember when you go home and see it again, and it brings back lots of memories. It was really good.
So I just have one more thing. I really appreciate the tone. When I came here, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't want to leave depressed. I know enough about it, which, is already kind of sad to me, but I think the touch that you put on it was just an even touch. I mean, you had some good humor in it, and you had some seriousness in it, and so, with all due respect, to other people's comments, I thought it was pretty good. I wouldn't want to see too much more, because I didn't want to leave, down, and I think we leave on a high note.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but we're really glad that people are getting the stuff that we found was also fun. I mean, there's some funny stuff. I have to say that whole thing John talks about, someone who's an only child and a teacher that you don't want to have. I'm an only child and a teacher. I'm thinking, oh my God. My husband's in deep trouble if it ever happens to me, because I'm already bossy. And so it's all over. But we're glad that that's happened.
It was Joe's bit where he's taking care of his mother-in-law.
Yeah.
Oh, when that scene, when you left the stage, I thought, what a lovely man, what a wonderful son-in-law.
thinking about whether or not to mention this now or later, but I'm just going to say it. Scott, you need to take this to Channel 6. Because I'll tell you, to be perfectly crass and shallow about it, it's going to get you an Emmy. but seriously.
Oh, Jim, I love you.
I kid you not. Take this to the bank.
Yeah.
But more important, it's important that you share this with millions of people. The hundred people who are going to see it tonight and tomorrow is a pittance. You need to share it with millions.
And not only with just normal people, but with the medical profession. I was sitting here thinking, this would be a great exercise for, they now have the ethics and UCD, the upcoming doctors, and this would be a great thing for them to see. These patients are people. They're people. They're our sisters, our grandmothers, our mothers, this kind of stuff, and it's going to affect them too. And I was just thinking that it's an interesting actor's exercise, but I think what came out of this for us as an audience is the content.
Absolutely. Good.
It's the content. And it really,
Yeah.
it's a huge compliment to you guys. You know that. It's like you transcended
It's your duty.
the acting. So we actually got the story. We didn't watch you act.
That's what we couldn't ask for more than that. And
so I think
we've
it's
talked
very
about, like I was saying, we've learned so much. And I was saying, I was reading a newspaper article one day, and I went, plaques and tables. I know what that means. Oh, I understand what they're talking about. Oh.
But it's a very wonderful.
Yeah, I've never seen anything better on the subject than this tonight. Really. I mean, the scope of the thing and the way it was done.
Who does he call, Lenore?
David Lowe.
On Channel 6. She's got it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. That's nice. That's high praise.
That was Nelson and Sydney. Dr. Al sitting in the second row over here. Was Susan here tonight, or did she have to step up? Oh, no? Okay, maybe tomorrow. Okay. Did you have any questions at all for us about the performance process, about anything at all? All Alzheimer's professional, we're going to just shift over to Dr. Al, right?
Maybe you should be over here.
Can you get it at any age?
So that's that?
Can you get it at any age, Alzheimer?
Can you get it at any age?
You get it?
Yeah, it's usually it's in your 70s and 80s, but I've seen them as young as in their 40s.
When we talked about, we mentioned some cases with B's mother, 52 years old, she passed away and was not diagnosed early on, so.
The B's siblings all got it very early.
Early with the, right.
What kind of feedback are you looking for, performance-wise?
You know what? Specifically, I'm going to send you all a survey so you know exactly what I'm interested in. But I'm interested in knowing how the topic itself maybe was complemented the performance process. So it was a very different performance process than maybe you're accustomed to seeing in psychological realism, where it's all scripted out and that one thing. We studied the tapes and the interviews, and so maybe you just have questions about that or comments about, did that work? How did that work for you? What worked? What didn't?
Well, I just thought it was phenomenal. And when you sent out the flyer, I thought, that seems like a really tricky, fine line to do voices without sounding imitative or in any way, insulting anyone. And you guys just nailed it. Everything. Great.
Thanks.
I was amazed. He said this is all verbatim. This is like, it's a script.
We have an inside joke. Sorry, the other opening night I leaned over to Blair and I said, I'm wondering if that shouldn't say pretty much for you. And Blair Blair said verbatish, and so immediately changed it to verbatish. So it's verbatish. We're as close as we can humanly be, we hope. There's the caveat right there, we hope.
Extremely close.
Show knows the
It's very,
script, I know the
yeah.
script, yeah.
Non-recognizable variation when it's there. It's so right on.
I was just thinking that that I really appreciated the choices of characters that you presented. That it really gave me a very broad view of how everyone involved handles the situation or deals with their, with the diagnosis and with living with it. And I thought that the differentiation that you and Blair gave to the characters, I never thought, oh, who is this? I never got them mixed up. So
Good.
certainly that is your performance, but it's also the choice in who
That's them.
was.
They-
I thought it was brilliantly done.
Yes.
I think they put it together beautifully. That you get some humor too, so you're not just like, oh gosh, about the woman that got killed by her father, or Jim Drennan's story, which is so heartbreaking. You get some of the more upbeat things too. They really put it together beautifully.
And you have a way of not making any of it morose. Like the whole thing is pretty light.
Well, they don't.
For some things.
They don't. Those people don't. That's the thing.
Oh, okay.
They
That's
don't.
neat.
Yeah.
I really liked how you used the photographs and the sayings and then bring it together. It really was very nicely done. Really tied it together well.
I appreciate that technique of using the quotes of something that they said was straight from Anna DeVere Smith. She does that in her work, and I sort of piggybacked off that and then just tried to find a phrase or something within the piece that I felt encompassed the entire piece or something like that.
Yeah, it did.
So, but get back to what Kristen was saying, it wasn't easy to get people to respond to my flyers that, I'm interested in interviewing people because it's a tender, tricky issue, and they didn't, come out of the woodworks, but we got some people, and the people that came wanted to tell their story, and it was almost like therapy for some of them. I felt like, once they got in front of the camera, and were just telling it, they forgot the camera was there, and they just told us their story, which is what we wanted, and I'm so grateful to them. That's why we put them up there, and we contribute to them. It's, very, very giving of them. You were up there.
Yeah, I like the photos at the end, but it might be interesting to show the photos earlier as you're going into those characters so that we could get more of a sense of who the people are.
I think you would have been comparing them too much to you.
We just talked about that last night. Yeah.
Thank you. Matt?
I appreciated the different slices of interviews. It wasn't all patients. It wasn't all caregivers. You portrayed a professional caregiver as well as family members. You had intergenerational perspectives. And overall, I think I really appreciate how you assembled it, not to lead us all to some conclusion, or not to scare the pants off of us, but just to do it as an honest expose. And everybody gets to go home with their own view, which is tricky. Watch a lot of stuff, like on the Health Channel, the History Channel, or whatever. And there's always a conclusion. There's always a gotcha. What you're supposed to be afraid of, what you're supposed to run out by. This is purely documentary, and very nice. Everybody gets their own thing.
I like that you stayed very much true in the performances to the interviews in terms of the staggered speech, people forming thoughts. Professional scripts, as we know, are more polished and they get to the point very easily most of the time. In here, in the fact that people were searching for the thoughts to convey, I think that really leaves us much more with a sense of the wonder of the thought process, the challenges of communication, and how all of us in any degree of health struggle to find the way to communicate our thoughts, and that in listening to each other there's a degree of patience that's always required, and that just gets accentuated in the circumstances that the disease brings about.
Does present a challenge to the actor, however, because your inclination is to correct the grammar, or in my case,
Right.
Susan's math. Which makes me crazy. So, and you can't. You got to go with that. And the other challenge is when you have someone like Mary Ann, whose thought processes are so jumbled sometimes, not to her, basically, but as an actor learning that. My goodness. I thought, just the constant repetitions and things. It's tough.
Was she invited to see?
They've all been invited, yeah, I believe all have or are coming.
Real quickly, I want to elaborate a little bit too on your comment and your basis with Anna Devere Smith. And for anyone, she's a playwright and theater theorist, and I think you might want. I might want you to go ahead and take off, because your comment is also extremely relevant to her theories. And if you want to just describe a little bit.
It originated in her wanting curiosity about how language can sort of refine the character, and her longitudinal study is on the road, searched for an American character, and so she was curious about language and that finding that gaps, and she has a wonderful quote, which I can't quote her right now, but it's verbatish. Something about the actor going to the other, and as opposed to the actor letting the other come to the actor, as opposed to a psychological realism, we're going in the other direction. And so it is a fascinating process, and it's based in the language and seeking that out and letting that come out to create the character. That's really fun.
And part of her training is as a linguist, and she is very interested in speech patterns and what is missing from a straight sentence structure to the gaps and the uhs and the miscellaneous, the mishaps that we all have. And I'm kind of bringing out my own as I'm talking to you now. But part of Scott's process is very interesting, because he's starting in a consideration of her and applying it now to Alzheimer's and this structure. So he really has branched out, and is almost like this is really a new realm, and I have a lot of respect for him and his thesis in this application. That's me.
I have to say that I was moved very much by the fact that I expected tonight to be a very strong Alzheimer's statement, but to me it spoke across a broader base than just that. It spoke, my mother not having Alzheimer's particularly, but having a neurological disease, and the end of her life having many similarities. Michael leaned over to me at one point and said, "You've done that." And it's almost universal. The symptoms are not necessarily manifested the same way, but a lot of the reactions and the emotions that go along with it were identical. It was much more personal to me than I expected it to be.
You're not the only one who said that. That's been a comment from at least one person every night.
I was going to say that I appreciated the fact that you didn't sugarcoat the changes in personality that happened. You mentioned being belligerent and being confrontational and angry, and that's certainly something that we've seen with my own mother-in-law. And it's very hard to remember her as she was and not as she is now.
Yeah, I experienced that too. Yeah. And that's very much a tribute to Dr. Al. That's exactly how he said it, and his people. That's what we're mirroring. What we're doing. That's what he said.
First of all, kudos to you for starting this. My mother had Alzheimer's, and watching some of, listening to some of the dialogue, there were bits and pieces. My wife and I could relate to, stuff that went out of my mom's life, and so it was almost like she's been gone for a few years, and I thought I put that to bed. It was almost like therapy to come here tonight to see what to see this. Honestly, I didn't know what to expect, and it was my mom was a school teacher, and she was.
I have to tell you, when we got to only child, I'm a teacher. I thought, oh my word, my husband's doomed. You know, I mean, and I'm already bossy. So it's, you know.
No, my mom took on the caregivers. There was this phase of her life where she had a pot in her hand swinging to the caregiver. My mom was not a violent person, and she had her moments. But I was curious, what drove you to the point where you had to tell this story? What was the tipping point for you to push this and bring it to the stage?
Well, I talk about it a little bit in the program, and that I had been wanting to do something about Alzheimer's for many years. I never really just found the time, the right project situation, volunteer here or there. I thought, I need to go to the Alzheimer's Day, so what can I do, that kind of thing. And when I started the master's program, I came in knowing that I wanted my emphasis to be on older adult issues. And so it's a master's in theater, but to get information about older adult theaters through the older adult issues through the medium of theater. And so that is something that I will continue to do and want to do. And then I stumbled on this performance process, and boom, after considering another topic for a period of time, this just was like a light bulb. I can't tell you. And immediately I knew it, and it felt right, and I hit the ground running, and I haven't left since.
Yeah, very cool. Very cool. Do you have plans of taking this show places?
Every night we get this one.
Because I think what I find is you do feel, as a quote unquote caregiver, you do feel so alone because you don't have that group. You can't, you bring up part about siblings. My brother was out of town and couldn't relate to half the stuff that we were going through trying to deal with my mother. And it's nice, I think, for somebody else to hear these stories and go, damn it, I'm normal. And it's really cool.
We hope to, very, very much. I'm going to finish writing. And then we're going
to finish his thesis.
There's my
Blair and I already have our graduate. We need to finish it.
No, absolutely. Lisa.
So Scott, I have a question. In these interviews, did the financial burden of this ever come up, and you just decided to not deal with it, or did it not come up?
It did. I think Susan talks about it quite a bit.
Which talks about the home and island and stuff, yeah.
Right.
A little bit, but I didn't notice it in anything else too much.
I had a question about planning. It was one of my questions, and it came up so a little bit with that, but I think that, and maybe you want to respond to, it was, we just had to make some choices, and it just, for one reason or another, didn't quite get in there.
And Susan's was the strongest, and she talks what's in there. She talks about the need for education, and she's fortunate because in VA, being on the VA bill, that's going to cover her husband. It's not that it wasn't a strong topic in any of theirs, and that really is the most prominent spot where it's addressed.
That's the only one that that stands out. She talks about when he retired and they bought a house on a golf course community, and he didn't play golf, and that was weird. And so then eventually they sold the house, and then when they moved, they rented instead of buying because of the financial things. And she talks a little bit about that, but not in great depth, however. They all deal a lot more with the day-to-day, if you will, personal stuff of it.
Scott, I work with Dr. Al, and I see his passion. And how long did it take you to just get a hold of that and be able to express it?
I would say, we talked about the order in which we work, and I wanted to make sure that I got sort of the words down, just the lines themselves, and then take on. I work by ear and very much local first, and so then after I had the lines, I went straight for the dialect, and it didn't take me terribly long. It's something that I'm able to do because I can just hear it, but I never stopped playing the the tapes. I mean, just constant. I mean,
You'd see us all walking around.
You're walking around here. iPhones. Blair downloaded it.
On his iPhone.
The DVD to his iPhone.
I got this program and I was able to download it all.
And I could see it. Yeah. And so, a few weeks before I think I really felt comfortable starting to get in that direction, but we worked maybe a couple of months total in
Like I say, we said the other night, Blair and I did, that Scott set the bar pretty high because we came in and he already had it down. And we're going, oh, great. So.
Well, I had to produce the darn thing
I
too.
know.
So that's good.
Blair and I came in at the end of July, so we started at the end of July.
Yeah, I have so much respect for all three of them for their ability to work this way, and it was a challenging in so many different areas that per them as actors, and they just really in fact, one of Kim's in this style, Kim goes directly from the first person she is, which is Cindy. She goes into playing Susan, and that is like a big turning point in the show, because it's like letting us know she's going right into another character at that point, and you just bring that. You're so distinct in both of them. It's amazing.
I'm glad. Good. Good question here.
Yeah, that was really good, by the way, because I did notice you changed the necklace and grabbed the glasses, and it was really helpful in shifting characters.
She has, you can't tell in that little clip, but she's got those glasses.
Yeah, I saw the glasses.
We need to
I
hire
didn't
a
see the necklace. I didn't see the
Yeah.
necklace. But the whole thing, Scott, is just brilliant. It really is. I was so excited to see that you had put something together, combining Alzheimer's and theater, which are two very passionate, distinct areas, and to put those two together was just crazy. And I was sitting here thinking, wow, he's doing this for a master's thesis. What a work of love. It was so obvious, because it wasn't, I know it was a lot of effort for you, but you brought so much education, so much insight into different families, physicians who have Alzheimer's, that I could really tell, and I'm sure everybody else, is such a work of love, and it's so from the heart.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I'd like to just ditto that. The thing that came up for me so strongly during the performance was a sense of compassion, because I felt like the people that were portrayed with such integrity and so much. It's like the care. It's as though I projected that the people who each person was playing, the actors fell in love with the people. That there was this bond that happened through really hearing people's stories, fully being that present to a person and their life. So for me, what came through in the performance is the deep compassion, not just for Alzheimer's, but for the human condition, for what we're all up against, for the process of aging, for the process of growth, for the process of reaching out and finding love for one another in difficult circumstances, against all odds. I just wanted to put in a plug for hoping that the show ends up in a context that's not just theatrical, because it seems to me to be such a deeply educational piece. And, I happen to live next door to someone who is in denial about having Alzheimer's. And, for example, if that support group that the wife of the man who's in denial had access to seeing such a show, I just think it would be extraordinarily helpful. I don't know if there's a plan in that direction or not, but
exploring possibilities.
It also just seems to me to be such a great theatrical model for how education through theater could happen. With other, maybe not Alzheimer's, but plugging in different content that perhaps places in life that's difficult, but getting to experience each other's stories in such a compassionate context.
A few points. One, that I think was a very
true decision not to have an intermission. You ran the risk of losing some of the sense and the continuity. Also, it kept it a good length. And I was reminded about 25 years ago at a neurology meeting, a paper was given by a neurologist that lived in Atlanta, and his wife was a social worker, and they were running a kind of a very embryonic, if you will, Alzheimer's clinic. And they decided to send out a survey to the caregivers, and they were just overwhelmed with it. It was like a 3-page thing, and people added paper and wrote in a single space, and realized this is an enormous untapped body of people who need attention as caregivers, and many of them invest in depression, anger, some resort to alcohol. And it was, I think, just the dawn of the awareness that this is an affliction that affects the entire family. Another point was when I was, well, first of all, let me disclose that I'm the very proud partner of Dr. Howe. I actually helped hire him, and when I called him to say, well, Bill, we'd like to have you come join us, he said, wow. I turned to the secretary, he says, Howe says, wow. And the other disclosure is that Scott is my son-in-law. Send it on small bills. No, but the point about the age at which you can have this going on. When I was in medical school over 40 years ago, the dementias, and they usually lumped both Pick's disease, which is extremely rare, and Alzheimer's disease, together, and they call them collectively the pre-senile dementias. And this was mentioned once during the program. But the definition of pre-senility was literally the age 65. And that if you were then demented, forgetful, less able to take care of yourself after 65, well, that was just senility and a normal thing. And of course, this whole changing demographic of the aging population has given that a lie, even though the percentages do go up in the 80s and 90s. But it was the case that Alzheimer's first published autopsy reports were in patients who had these neurofibrillary tangles and who were all under the age of 65. We published, I think, just a handful of cases. So it's quite a contemporary take on how this disease affects caregivers. But Scott, I just add my admiration to what you've accomplished here. You've had wonderful support from your dramaturg and from your actors too. But the concept and how it came across are very meaningful. Be congratulated.
Thank you.
Because I learned so much from Dr. Al. Seriously, I mean, I've said it every night. I was reading the paper one day, it was an article about Alzheimer's. They were talking about plaques and tangles, and I went, well, I know what that means. So,
I want to thank Scott. I never sounded so good.
I want to thank you for not saying neurofibrillary.
you should know we don't call you Dr. Al, though. We call you Goes by Bill. Love that.
And also our director, Adrian Scher, who couldn't be here tonight. We have to definitely pay kudos and tribute to her for coming on board. And she's said in the last 2 nights in the talkbacks, she didn't know. She asked me, well, why do you need a director for such a piece? And she said that as we progressed in conversation, she quickly really found out why. And it was more than just staging a piece, but it was sort of, well, I'll elaborate on that.
Things like what we would, there were rehearsals where we literally sat with the DVDs with the interviews and would go bit by bit by bit by bit, and she would say, yeah, that's not what I'm hearing. I hear this. And we'd have to go back and really pick apart what we thought that person was really saying. So it was that kind of thing, yeah.
And underneath what was going on. Mm-hmm. We were talking about earlier about the process and the language and so forth. And as I mentioned in the program, it's not only what is said, but what is not said.
Right.
Which I think is a very, very important aspect of this process. And I think that Blair embodies that a lot in Nelson, when he's doing Nelson, because Nelson was actually quite talkative and said quite a bit but not in the text that we, actually in the version that we cut down to. And so what's going on underneath, is really what he reflects quite remarkably.
Someone else.
It was me.
Aaron?
Okay. How did you decide on the order of the excerpts? How did you make that choice in the progression of where you were going to put what?
Yeah, that's a great question. First I'll start with Dr. Al, because what we found with his responses, he just came in with a piece of paper in front of him, and the camera was on him, and he just went. He just talked. And I didn't cue him once, and he talked so eloquently, I think like most people write, and all of a sudden we realized he was framing it from topic to topic. And it was very easy to take these blocks and sort of put them in, sequence them without. And so that was, I think, a decision that we made not too far into the process.
And he touches upon everything that is related to each of the individuals, their situation, and what they're bringing into it. He has something to say about it. And Scott did go through a lot of different considerations on whether or not to just extract elements from each individual's interview and then categorize it more according to specific themes or areas of concern. And ultimately, it just, with the great, Dr. Al, so it's great assistance as a narrative element, then the flow of the pieces just really felt most right in this order and structure.
He ends the first initial piece in talking about that's a tip-off about the language issues, which feeds right into Nelson's disclosure about the difficulties that he was having early on. It made sense. That was an easy choice for some reason. It just felt right to start with Nelson and Cindy. Sort of on and on. We very much, what just jumped off the page immediately was Marianne and Jerry. Their scene was just so incredibly energetic, and we knew that we wanted to put that towards the end of the piece. At the end of the piece, and bracing his talk about bracing ourselves just fit right before that very, very nicely. I always felt like I was bracing myself for Jerry and Marianne. Here it comes.
Jerry and Marianne were fascinating to me because I couldn't tell. You can see where her difficulties are, but I also saw them working as a couple, and I thought this is a long-established relationship, and this kind of interchange back and forth, and I could see, and it was hard for me to tell him, like, is he helping her because of her disease and her inability to express in a way that he thinks we understand, so he's going to reiterate, is that because of her disease, or is this just a part of them as a couple, as they have always lived? And so it was very moving to me, because I thought they are still a unit and working this together, and it is still them against, all of these outside
And they're both angry together.
And they're angry together, yeah.
And they also are suffering from the 1-2 punch. He has ALS.
I wondered about that, because I saw that.
It's a rare form of ALS, but so here they are with her, with the Alzheimer's, and he's got the ALS, and it's just, wow.
What is, what is the time limit on that? Because I know that you can have ALS for a while, but then at a certain point, it's like you can live for a long time when you're incapacitated.
Yeah, like I said, he's got a rare form. We don't know. He's still early.
It's moderate. He said it was moderate.
Right now, it's affecting his hands and his arms, which is why you get that interesting kind of movement of where it is.
Scott, although I'm absolutely delighted that you chose to actually say Dr. Al's name out as marketing him, I love it. And it's been wonderful. I've seen every night and the responses people get from him, and knowing that this is a real person. Why did you choose to really portray a real person? Why not a fictitious
It's the performance office that based on Anna DeVere Smith. That's what she did with Twilight, as I mentioned in the program. It's about Rodney King. She went out and her search for the American character. She's going out and she's interested in real people and her. She's looking at certain events in her earlier career. Her most recent piece, in fact, opened this weekend in Massachusetts, has to do with cancer and AIDS and the human body. So it's more aligned with what we're doing here. But that's the process. It's just it has to be that way. It's just goes hand in hand. It's definitive part of the process.
I wanted to add to that you're portraying a neurologist who is caring. I think that it's great exposure for neurologists because you think of them as Marianne depicted them as being cold and treating people like children. But to know that neurologists are out there dealing with Alzheimer's patients who really do care about quality of life for their patients, I think is huge. And also to show that although Alzheimer's falls under maybe one umbrella, it's so different for each individual, or each family, or how each person reacts. You can't just rubber stamp it. So that really comes out.
I think we're fortunate that we have two of the most caring neurologists here in the room with us, spoken tonight, Dr. Dozier and Dr. Al. And I'm not just saying that because I know them and I relate to one.
That's in lieu of the money.
And I'm hoping he'll pay for lunch tomorrow. I'm not saying it because of that. It's because countless people have said that about them that I've heard, over and over, and I know it to be true.
We hear it every night from somebody in the audience.
Really?
That they talk about how wonderful Dr.
We had Dr. Pucchetti's patient here. We've had Dr. Knox's patients here, and both of yours too. So. I'm just curious what you found to be the most challenging part of putting this together, doing it. I mean, it's a big thing to take on.
It's kind of a toss-up between the transcription. It was just tedious to have the piece in front of the VCR, the DVD player, and just rewind, type. I took 3 weeks off work to get that done, and what Michelle and I had to struggle with.
I did one.
No, not the transcription. I mean, yeah. But what to exclude? Because there were pearls, just so many. We could have made 3 to 10 different versions of this because we're talking about 45-minute interviews and what to include and what not to, and it was just we had to wrestle it out. No, I really think that should be there. No, I'm thinking that. And so that was extremely challenging.
Did a great job.
As an actor, it's shoving down all your acting instincts.
And really trying to stick to
Try to
who
be
that person
as
is.
authentic as you can as to who that person is.
Yeah.
Because, part of your actor brain wants to say, well, I think it might be better if I said it like that. No. So that's tough.
We had an interesting actor thing. Can I talk about the listening thing?
Yeah.
An interesting actor thing come up that I observed in one of the performances is
Last night, right?
Last night, Blair said something, a certain inflection on a word, just the way he always says it. But Kim's natural response as an actor who was listening on the stage was to respond to how he said it. And so her inflection on her next line changed. It sort of matched his.
And I didn't even know it.
And I picked up on that, and I'm going to learn about that.
So glad I provided fodder for you. She blew it.
I'm curious about your interview process.
experience with each of the people that you worked with? Did you structure your interview in a similar way for each person? Was it an open-ended kind of interview process, or were you guided by Dr. Au in the kinds of questions that you should use?
Not the questions. The questions were all, actually what I did, and I was a little bit leery about this because I wasn't sure about coming from Anna Devere Smith, what she did, and what I had read about is that she had the same questions kind of for every individual, and it wasn't particular. So, but I decided that it would be very important to write out a set of questions for the professionals, a set of questions for those with the disease, and a set of questions for caregiver family. And so slight variances, but also had commonalities. So I asked them all about what do you think is the greatest challenge, for example, and that is repeatedly comes out in the piece. So
I hear that question. I didn't, I'm trying to listen for it in terms of those threads of what consistency would have been in terms of the questions you were asking. I could hear that question for sure.
Another interesting thing that came up in the course of some of the interviews is I'm not getting something like with Nelson. I mentioned this the other night.
What did you feel?
Yeah. I asked him upon diagnosis, what was your response? Where did you go from there? And his first thing was that, well, when I was first diagnosed, I said, oh. And then he kind of went and expanded a little bit further, talking about his mother, who he thought had it, and now she had strokes, and kind of sort of circled around. And then Cindy said, but honey, how did you feel? And he still never really quite got to it. So that wasn't his personality. So I did take a gamble, and at that point, and I said, when you said that when you first heard about it, you said, oh, what was going on in that O? And never quite got to it. But at least I took the gamble to vary the process of the interview at that time to see if we could get that out of Nelson. And what we got was more of what was not said again.
John and me would have talked forever. Forever. Because they have so much information.
And are so passionate.
And very passionate. You may not see it on his face, but she's very passionate.
You and the other actor, you don't see you guys anymore because you guys just do such a great job at turning into different people.
Oh, thank you so much.
But in the subtle wardrobe changes, like when he tucked in real tight with the belt for some guys and blue shirt or whatever, but it really helped. And then the cello music was so pretty, and it made it sound so movie-like. It really did sound like a documentary.
Michelle's choice.
That was so good. It was like simple.
Great idea.
The lighting was good, and then the montage at the end is just really neat. It's like there they are, That's what it's like a neat surprise.
With Raquel, I think when you were standing at the podium, then you saw her on the
Yeah, you
street,
see
like,
some of
oh my
that.
God.
What I always laugh about is Susan's thing like that, because I do that several times.
Well, and on the and I can't keep the character name straight, but when he came and he put the couch together and he leaned over, and I was
That's
like,
Jen.
oh, it's the polygon. So I was seeing. I was like, oh, that's what they took. Oh, that's what they took. Okay.
And directorially for Adrian was a challenge because they were all sitting down. All of them were sitting down in front of the camera. So what do you do? We couldn't have that. So she decided on which ones. She decided that she would have Joe get up and move around. I'm standing the whole time. Dr. I was sitting the whole time. And so, yeah, we had some variances there.
Could have considered stage blocking in your initial interviews and just asked them to sit here, please.
She's over here.
Try it this way. No.
You just update yourself. Get back to it again.
One thing that we had to kind of lose so that there was some variety in the staging is John and Bea sit next to each other the whole time, and they have this sort of unspoken thing where they cue each other. There's no reason that the other one would start talking, but they do, because they've been together so long and they're close there, and you get that, and you don't we don't really get to do that because we have to make it visually a little more interesting. So you lose some of that stuff, but still as an actor, it was fun to look at that and see that relationship.
I was riveted, and it was odd, but I think it was easier for me to hear the stories from actors than if the actual people had been on stage sharing their stories. Maybe once removed, or I wasn't feeling like I was worried about them telling their story. That was very helpful to me because it took that part out of it for me, and I was really into the story.
Very interesting comment, thank you.
Put that in your
I'm trying to remember it.
Okay.
Oh, I've got it on video.
Yeah, we got it.
Both of us really enjoyed the show as well, and we both kind of experienced the same thing. I've got my mother with vascular dementia, and Laura's mother has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's recently. She's got two siblings, which is some low-level conflict. Really hasn't bubbled up to the surface yet, but if I were to look for any particular significant change in the play's structure, I would like to have seen a scene with interviews, if you have them, of two siblings having that conflict. Because everybody else pretty much is supportive of each other in the couples. So a scene with the actual conflict would add an edge to it that is not there with the current structure.
Yeah, the interviews that came forth, nothing like that was really present. Dr. Al does talk a great deal more about the sibling dynamic and money issues with the will and so forth, but it just, we didn't get that in.
One of the things Bea talks about that we don't have is that she brought her brother home to her house for a week to kind of give her sister a ring. And she said that was the longest week of her life. She had no idea what her sister-in-law was going through. No idea. And it really, you kind of go, wow.
Just one quick thing, it was brought up about some of the doctors that don't get it. That was my experience with my mom, was she had some doctors that totally got it and others just didn't. They would have conversations where they would ask her questions like they expected her to just come up with the answers, and I'd have to grab the doctor and take them out there and go, you don't understand. And I think that is so important that, there was, again, she had some that were totally compassionate, totally got it, but others just didn't. And it's, was frustrating for me as a caregiver, as somebody looking out for my mom, to deal with that. So it was brought up a little bit on some of the way they treat others.
Medicine is doing that nowadays, as the physicians have their passion and they're kind of getting their own little niche. And so it's a good lesson for all of us that we seek out the doctors with that particular discipline. Like Dr. Al, that is his specialty, that and MS. And so, if we've got other neurologists, but they might favor Parkinson's or epilepsy. So it's a good lesson for all of us. It's start looking for that niche doctor if we've got that niche.
Unless there's other questions, I just want to point out that another thing Scott and I have in common is a birthday. We'll both pass another year and share lunch this Monday, and I wanted to wish him a happy birthday.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. How are you, Cheryl? I looked over and I went, I know that face. Well, I'm happy to see you too. How are you? We're great.
Director, Adrian Scher. Of course, Blair and Kim will be back. There she is.
Here's Catherine.
Yes. We share her talents with questions at all, just fire away. How did this strike you? How did this performance process, this is a little bit different than what you might see it affect the topic. Anything, it's open game. We'd love to answer any questions.
Because he is writing his master's.
I'm writing I have most of your emails, so I'll be sending you a survey.
We should introduce Jerry and John and me.
Yes, we have, up and back, we've got Jerry Fuller.
My wife just went to
And Marion is in the restroom, but she'll be back. We've got John and B here in the front row. Who,
We thank you.
Yeah,
It
because
was excellent. It was excellent.
She still sounds just like my grandmother. I'm from Missouri. You sound just like my grandmother. It was amazing. The first time I saw the DVD, I went, "Oh my God, it's Grandma Mary!" Oh. Except you didn't say Ewans. If you'd said Ewans, then.
But you guys, it was so excellent because I noticed the phone, which they didn't notice, which my mom has around her neck today. All the time. And you might not have noticed she had a phone when she did my mom around her neck. You nailed it.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, it was just excellent.
Are you professional actors and actresses?
Yes. Yes, they are, and sometimes they get paid. But not this time.
Yeah, just, we're all, you graduated from here?
No, just
Okay.
did now.
So the three of us graduated from here. We've got our, Kim and I go way back. Matter of fact, the first show I ever did at Sac State was in this very space, and she directed it. So
Does anybody in your family have it at all?
No.
Never had any experience?
Never had to deal with it.
You sure did a
This
good
was
job.
such a learning experience. But we both have our graduate degrees in acting, and I teach at Sac City College in the theater department.
and we're always working. So in that respect, yes, we're professionals. We just don't make a living doing it.
Well, they do get paid, they're professionals sometimes, but they did this for love.
And we're glad we did. We learned a lot.
It was really wonderful, all of you. I was kind of curious about the choice of having the doctor on stage a lot of the time. Was this part of director's choice or?
It was. I'm gonna let Adrian speak to that, but I'll just say that it started because of the way Dr. Al replied to his questions was really so topical, and he just framed it from here to here to here. And so we decided early on that we would take blocks and we would put them throughout to kind of connect us through for a through line. And then Adrian took it from there directorially.
Yeah, it was directorial, and also we made some changes to the script so that it was structured that way when Scott and I first started working together. The original piece kind of had two voices taking you through the story, and one was Scott's. It was his project and his poem and his grandmother, and one was Dr. Au, and I was a little confused reading it as to who was guiding me through the story.
So to be more specific with that, the text introducing each of the scenes, I would say, I met with John and B on this particular day, and so my voice was in throughout, and so that's where Adrian kind of said, who's telling this, and so we made a decision about that.
And then also originally Scott was going to play all the men, and Kim was going to play all the women. So part of that discussion was, should Dr. Au be a dedicated actor, playing that one role instead of playing all the men? We all agreed, but it was initially my idea that was going to be an easier journey for the audience to follow if we had a guide, sort of. And that's why we left him up sometimes, because we thought the words from the other interviews so beautifully illustrated what he was teaching, and he was so articulate. Just kind of gave it through it.
It was sort of interesting to have a medical presence, but. Oh, sorry.
I have given over 6,000 talks on this now.
And I've been to 142 cities, and I think you copied one of my comments. I think you hit it right. The only thing you didn't touch on was sexuality, and I always touch on sexuality.
That's just because they didn't put it in the text.
Yeah, it's a big deal around our house, but Dad can't wait till it gets to the sexuality part. But everything I say, you said it. I mean, and you know, right to a T. It was like I was sitting there.
That was, and I've mentioned this before, our role in this is really, to present what you said, the way you said it, and ignore every actor impulse that we have. Try to sweeten it up or punch it up. It's just because it's your words, and the simpler we are about it, actually the more effective they are.
Well, the both of you came in just like me and I do when we
We watched the interview.
We watched you a lot. We watched you with Marianne a lot too, Jerry. A lot.
With the remote control, we'd go back and say, did you see that?
It's like looking in the mirror. It was so well done, you two. It was incredible.
It's so lovely hearing that from the four of you.
And I, for one, learned from watching it. I got a lot of positive reinforcement from watching you two do it. Things I wasn't consciously aware of in our interaction too. So thank you. I mean, it was like, wow.
Well, I think that we really became very fond of the two of you and the two of you and everyone else. We really are quite fond of you. We don't really know you personally, but we sort of do. And we're very fond of you.
But
Did you happen to read our book?
Yes.
Oh, yes, we both did.
That's,
And so did you.
That's a lot.
Yeah, there's, it's, and the other thing, and Scott, can certainly attest to this, is that there is so much in the interviews that we couldn't do.
Right.
The stories that we left out and the other pieces are equally fascinating.
And let me go back to the part that you said about the sexuality not being included. We wanted to make sure, Michelle Cruffin and I, my dramaturg and I, worked very hard on what we were going to edit down, and 90-minute show, that's all we've got. 45-minute interviews, 11 of them. We've got to make some choices here, but there were some overlap, okay, in topics, and so Dr. Rao talks about a little bit in that, in the father with the daughter, and so
you picked that little piece out.
Right, and so that was where that was covered. Rebecca's was more so about caregivers, although you folks talked about it as well, and so there were echoes, but there were mainly the pieces would focus on it.
Well, I think the part about the father and the daughter is a big deal. And
It's gotten a huge reaction every night.
Yes, people just don't realize that all this stuff happens. And when we give talks, our talk is called the Common Sense Approach.
Right.
And like I said, we've been in probably about 35 cities or states.
And you can understand everything you said with common sense. It wasn't above any of us, I don't think.
Well, it's everything
No,
you
it's
said.
everything you said.
It's everything you said. And I want to tell you that 2 nights actually, when I said the thing about you don't try to bring into your world, but go into their world. Somebody in the audience would go, yes. So people really knew what you were talking about.
Like he says, there's so much to it. There's so much more to it. But I think he hit the strong points. There's so many people can agree to that. We just got back from 4 days in San Francisco, and all of them just said, well, we didn't come up with this. But if people just use common sense, quit reading it out of a book. We did Walter Reed. We did Walter Reed.
Jerry, do you have something?
Yeah, we're ministering, we have been for 4 years now, to a priest, Roman Catholic priest, and his companion. Now she's his caregiver, who was his housekeeper for 40 years as a priest, and they're in Los Banos in a nursing home together. And a year ago, she started calling him mother. He started calling her mother, and he still does. He thinks that she's his mother, and And it's a very complex relationship, and it's going into a serious phase now. And one of the challenges we have is trying to see if she's willing to leave the home and go back to having a life of her own. She may not be. It may not be that she can do that. She does not need to be in the home with him, but
He doesn't know who she is.
yeah, finally she does.
She's been with him how long?
Oh.
40 or more years. She worked in his family's house as a domestic when he was a child. Yeah.
I think one of the things that both of you touched on, and one of the things that we realized, because Kim doesn't have any in her family, I don't have anybody in my family who's had it, is the complexity of all of this, and we're hoping that that's what's coming out. Is that this is not an easy thing. It's not. There's no one answer. You can't rely on, as Cindy comments. It's not that image you get from the TV commercials or the TV movies or anything like that. It's so much more complex.
Yeah, Susan had a line about that wasn't included. You've seen one Alzheimer's patient. You've seen one Alzheimer's patient.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
From a perspective of somebody who has not done much more than observe the effects of Alzheimer's on various people, and I'm sitting here watching this production, I think you've got an excellent message to be delivered with the way you're doing this right here, because the doctors roll out. It's kind of like a binder. It's binding this whole thing together, but then the two of you going through these roles is giving individuals stories, and you're doing it, to my way of thinking, very strongly, because I'm thinking back to coming here and working Linnea, and the one thing that struck me was you hit a different personality that was distinctly identifiable with each person you were working. You did that wonderfully well.
Adrian just said her work here is done.
No, it isn't. This has to go on the
And
road.
since this is the final performance, I guess.
That was the next
Yeah.
question. Are you gonna be standing? Are you gonna be touring with it?
Okay.
He has to write his thesis first.
That's the big thing. First he has to write his thesis.
Writing my thesis, and then once that's completed, yes, we have talked about it. We have a strong interest in seeking other opportunities to give it a life, give it some legs. People have asked, are you going to do outreach with the medical community? Are you going to take it to another theater? So a gentleman said about documenting a DVD or whatever. We'll just explore all opportunities. We're not going to say no to anything right now. We're excited about the response so far, and that it's done.
One thing that I wanted to say is that when I was watching all of you, I felt like I was watching the people that you were portraying, and you forget that you're in a role, and because I think you did an outstanding job.
Thank you. The job is done. Never. It's
That's
never
my
done.
mom, by the way.
You didn't pay me.
We don't ever know you.
So I mentioned this to Scott, but I want to say it again because something that strikes me about this piece, and I don't want to in any way not give credence to the people and the families who suffer from Alzheimer's, but this show to me is very much about aging and familial relationships, because a lot of what you all have talked about, when my grandfather was passing away, when he was on his deathbed, he was calling everyone mama. He was calling his wife mama. I remember my grandmother doing the same thing. She passed away of cancer. And when my grandfather, he stopped chewing. He would have food in his mouth and we'd be like, chew, eat. And so just the little things that when those cells go, and we, my sister, my father and I were very much his caregivers. There were times when my sister was cleaning up diarrhea in the house. So he was a diabetic and double amputee diabetic. but so there's things about aging that I think you can really place yourself in as this is what you're going to be experiencing, and how do you as a caregiver in any situation have to deal with that, or some of the things that you, it's just so educational, and to look back and say, I mean, we already know who in my family is going to be taking care of my parents and who's just going to be the criticizer, not there. So I just want to say that this is so much a show about aging and family and relationships and responsibilities, that there is a very much an educational message that crosses a lot of different levels. So thank you.
Like I've said every night, every time Blair as John says, the thing about school teachers and only children being the hardest to deal with. My poor husband has hell ahead of him, because I'm an only child and I'm a teacher. So I just kind of look at him and go, well, let's just hope nothing happens. Or he'll really be sorry.
We did all the Walter Reed training and all of their staff, and it was similar to school people.
Yeah.
But they all came to us afterward and they said, why aren't we taught this? Everything we're taught is out of books.
Right. I think that goes back to what Jerry and Mary Ann were
away. You know, it's common sense is all it is.
Two things. First of all, whose idea was it to use the cellist and the projections?
The cellist was Michelle Cruff, my friend in dramaturg. That was her. I had known that I wanted to use classical music in the transition. Michelle is a cellist, and so she came up with the idea. Said, what about live cellist? And then she talked about a DVD that she has of Yo-Yo Ma playing in a computerized images within a cell, a prison cell. And she had the wonderful analogy that Alzheimer's is like a prison of the mind. And I went, oh yes, we have to do this. And then she talked about the Bach cello suites, and then we just took it from there. And I went strictly with that, and then I selected all the pieces and put the order in myself. So just took
It was
from
brilliant. Brilliant it was. And then what about the projections? Doing the title and the little description.
Right. Well, I took it from Anna Devere Smith. You might read about in the program. I took a lot of what she does and try to incorporate it here. And then there were certain points where I would veer off, and that's what I'm writing about, a comparative analysis between what she did. But she uses quotes also within the actors within her scenes, and so I decided that I would try and find something that encompassed the scene itself, or the monologue, and bring that up, and so I piggybacked off that.
It worked well. Did you record the whole show?
Have you recorded?
John's
the man.
John's
the man.
We thank him for all his John did all the projections and the text and that kind of thing, and so we have a whole other show actually, just projector stuff.
I would like to see this presented to doctors in training, especially geriatricians, so that the training that physicians get would be of a family perspective and be more rounded than probably what they do get in their training, in their curriculum.
That's been suggested. Right. I agree with you. It's a great idea. Because that might help, again, in regards to what Jerry and Mary Ann talk about, and that, realizing that they're still aware up to a certain point, right? And you need to treat them like they're aware.
I just wanted to second that, because I'm an RN, and I do work with the Alzheimer's patients. So I'm seeing them at different levels, and I'm not individually involved, only as a nurse, but I get very involved. And your portrayal, I could identify with so much with different people. And, it would be great to present this to not family caregivers, but hired caregivers who would really get a lot out of this. is they may not have, as I've done, an individual, but they do have, they have some input in it and they see it. And I think it would be of a great help. And doctors as well. I mean, they see the patient, but they would see it on a data. There are many times when I kind of tell them, well, this is what's going on, this
Good
is
for
not
you.
what you They don't scare me. So, and I enjoy this immensely. Scott, all of it. You guys are great.
Let me tell you good news that's happened at UCSF that we go to. At the forum that was held in Oakland almost a year ago, we confronted the doctor there who runs that thing. And the next time we went to his facility, Mary Ann's primary doctor was a changed man.
All right.
They heard the message. I couldn't believe. He never looked at me once during the whole thing. He talked to her. I was,
Yeah, I would ask the question and then give Terry the answer.
so they are open. They are open if they get the message to treating the person and not the disease.
Now, Bee's family, what her brother-in-law did is took the same test as her sister had Alzheimer's. And it was so much easier to get her in there. But she went in there and did it again. It was so positive for the doctors because they would compare him to her. And he did every test that she did. And this was, I'm thinking about Dr. Jarvik and Dr. at UCLA, Dr. Small. All of these doctors she deals with constantly because he's one of the first 3 in the world in research. And the fact that she had 7 in her family with her. And they all had autopsies. And they all got it at 42 years old. But I hear you talk about RNs. We've done always talked to all of the United States. And the 2 hardest situations we have are RNs and doctors. I mean, you don't tell an RN what to do. She knows it all.
Especially if you're a school teacher or an OT doctor.
Not always, but in defense. Oh, really?
I'm going to, he might get mad at me, but I get to my sister. I'm going to put my dad on the spot a little bit. And I want to hear what your response was. We used the poem and
It was my mother.
right.
And hard for me. The poem, the poem Scott wrote, my mother had Alzheimer's for 12 years and was in a nursing home for 10. And Scott would visit her frequently. And she was a singer. And the last thing to go was music. And Scott would go and sing to her. She had a grand mal seizure probably about 2 or 3 years before she passed away. And then she ceased to know me. She was friendly and everything, but she seemed to know Scott. And the last time we were there was a couple days before she passed away. And Scott sang to her, and she tapped her fingers. Sorry, this is hard. I'm gonna turn this way for a while.
Wait, that was good. That was a good idea.
I didn't intend to say
Hey, the feelings are real.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that you portrayed is the period that they go through when they keep repeating things. And we used to get, it was the early stages when she was at home and she'd call us, and to this day, I still am amazed that she could remember our phone number. And she would call and say she was downtown, and when the boys get home from school, meaning Brian and his brother Jerry, tell them to come and pick me up. And then, first I started correcting her, and then I realized that I shouldn't be doing this. And the next time she'd call back, this is all within maybe 10 minutes, she'd call about 4 times with the same message. And I find, that's when we really started getting on top of things and realizing that.
My mother was blind as well, and she went through all the stages, and she was at home. Her husband had passed away, that Scott mentioned in the poem, and we had to get a caregiver in because neither my brother and I were able to care for her, and the caregivers were telling us that what was on her, that we had to restrain her a number of times, and because she was blind, she would go out in the street, and she was confined for a period of time, and so the stages we went through. Scott was very young when this happened, but it was very real for Bobby and me and my brother to go through this. So it's very, very touching the way you did it. I have to commend all of you. And I'm sorry, you did a marvelous job knowing how to control these people.
How did you know that?
I love the way you did what you did on the screen. And I just thought that was so important to identify who you were and what the subject was. My daughter, Scott's older sister, was here the other night, and we saw her yesterday, and she was expressing what she got. Of course, she's a sibling, and so you get a different kind of perspective. So I got the first hand. There you go, Scott.
You know, everything you talked about, the chocolate syrup and everything, we used it. I mean, this is all real stuff.
You're the one that said it.
And the other thing we use is Tic Tacs, and it works. Person has an injury, we use Tic Tacs. If their shoulder hurts, we use Tic Tacs. As long as they got that bill, they're okay with that piece. And it works. You did a fantastic. I walked in the store when I said, now they're gonna want these actors to think they know what they're doing. You convinced me. I will say, I am a hard person. 27 years I've been here, there's nobody.
I have to embarrass my son because for me, tomorrow's his birthday.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Scott. Happy birthday to you.
And on that note,
Sherry
I just wanted
wants
to
it.
say one thing, and that is that there was never a moment when I felt that you were actors reciting a script. You embodied those people. It was just so extemporaneous that it didn't ever sound like it was something that we could memorize. Kudos to everyone.
And I took from it because I've been a family caregiver and also I now work in the daycare. So we deal with both the participant or the loved one and the caregiver. And I thought it was really nice that you had that balance.
Appreciate that.
It was like a whole story.
Thank you all very, very much for staying.
I know you did.